The world dissolved into a swirling incandescent agony, a grotesque kaleidoscope of pain that seared through my very being. My face, my carefully sculpted facade, the instrument of my triumphs, was dissolving, melting like cheap wax under a cruel sun. The scent of cedar and amber, usually my signature, was now choked by the acrid stench of burning flesh, a testament to a betrayal so profound it threatened to unravel the very threads of my existence. This wasn't merely pain. It was the obliteration of everything I had painstakingly built, a brutal reminder of the helplessness I had sworn to bury forever, a searing echo of Peter's fading breath in that squalid tenement. My vision, my control, my very identity all gone, replaced by a blinding, blistering inferno. That was the moment the world decided to remind me of the squalor I'd fought so hard to escape. Though the seeds of this particular catastrophe had been sown weeks earlier in a moment of audacious hubris, I now almost regretted a calculated gamble. I thought I could control a game I was sure I would win. Let me be clear, I am not some ordinary man blessed with mere conventional good looks. My features, sharp and aristocratic, complemented by a lean, tailored physique, are a weapon, a key to unlock doors others only dream of. When I walk into a room, the air shifts. It always has. This isn't vanity, it's an objective truth. My career, my carefully cultivated connections in the art world, they are merely extensions of my inherent superiority. People, as I've always known, are so utterly predictable. Give them a compliment, a touch of feigned sympathy, a glimpse of vulnerability, and they'll eat from your hand. Pathetic, really, but exquisitely useful. The problem, if you could call it that, was Hannah. My beautiful, utterly insecure Hannah. She was a stunning creature, all golden curls and eyes the color of rich, dark chocolate, a living sculpture of what society deems perfection. Yet her fragile ego, a direct consequence of her parents' grotesque neglect, made her a liability. Her father, a man I'd have dismissed as a pathetic failure had he not been such a useful case study, once told her as a child that her acne was disgusting. Such a crude, blunt instrument of a man. It was a wound that never healed even as her skin cleared. It festered, transforming into a desperate, insatiable hunger for external validation through her physical appearance. I saw it, of course. I saw it from the very beginning, and I understood how to use it. Hannah, with her striking looks, never had to buy her own drinks. Men flocked to her, drawn by her superficial brilliance. But her fixation with always being the center of attention could at times become corrosive, like the infamous Atalini Gate. I remember it vividly. A gala dinner, a meticulously tailored Cesare Atalini suit, a new Yachtmaster Rolex gleaming on my wrist, the one with the bi-directional rotatable bezel and black dial, a subtle declaration of my rising status. The senior partners at the firm, usually so stiff, practically started a battle royale, craning their necks to get a closer look at my acquisitions, my success. Had Hannah stayed home that night, my triumph would have been absolute, acknowledged. But no, she had to be there, radiating her insipid charm, drawing the gaze away from me, the architect of our ascension. I woke up the next morning to find a fist-sized tear beneath the lapel of that dinner jacket, along with 2 buttons missing. A petty, childish act of sabotage, a direct assault on my image, my very essence. My blood ran cold with rage, a familiar sensation that often accompanied the realization that someone dared to challenge my preeminence. Her hesitation, her barely concealed jealousy, reminded me of that collector in Chicago, the one whose secrets I buried in my pocket notebook before he crumbled under the weight of his own pathetic insecurities. I had dealt with lesser minds then, and I would deal with Hannah now. In the months following that incident, my so-called trophy wife insisted on attending every last cocktail party and charity ball. No matter how mundane, draped in the flashiest dresses imaginable, her hair meticulously styled, luscious and bouncy. With a champagne flute perpetually in hand, she endlessly, nauseatingly referred to herself as my trophy wife or the winning lottery ticket that blew into my hand. It was a performance, a crude, desperate pantomime designed to remind everyone, and most annoyingly, me, that she was the true spectacle. My blood simmered. I could feel the eyes on her, the whispers, the way she absorbed the light, leaving me in her shadow. It brought a familiar bitter taste to my mouth, a taste of being overlooked, of being the invisible boy in the crumbling tenement while the world paid attention to something else. I twisted the tarnished silver ring on my right hand, Peter's ring, a silent promise to myself that I would never again be so utterly forgotten, so easily overshadowed. No, Hannah would learn her place. She was my accessory, not the other way around. Little by little, these snide remarks, these pathetic attempts to diminish me, ate away at my composure. From the way she talked, you'd think she married a professional Shrek impersonator rather than a man destined for true greatness. The next time she dropped a, "Don't you think you're punching above your weight with me, honey?" quip in front of polite company, a pathetic attempt to belittle me, to assert her supposed dominance. I smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of my lips that promised both charm and a hidden blade. I raised my whiskey glass, its amber liquid a warm comfort against the cold calculations forming in my mind. "Actually," I said, my voice smooth, perfectly modulated, "I reckon we're about even looks-wise." The words hung in the air, a perfectly weighted stone dropped into a still pond. A long, awkward pause followed, interrupted only by one startled onlooker choking on a shrimp tartlet. The flicker of shock in Hannah's eyes, the subtle clenching of her jaw. It was a victory, small but satisfying. To Hannah's credit, her temper didn't boil over until we got home. The drive was a silent, simmering cauldron of unspoken fury. I could feel her rage radiating from the passenger seat, a palpable heat that pressed against the cedar and amber scent of my cologne. Rather than explode in a spectacular display of humiliation, she just endlessly ranted about how I'd placed us on equal footing physically. 30 minutes of shouting, screaming, and stomping around the house later, with half the furniture sprawled across the floor, or broken, a crude, destructive tantrum befitting a child. Not a woman I had chosen to elevate, she finally spat, "Fine, we're even. You're the window dressing and the main breadwinner in this relationship. Congratulations." With that, the bedroom door slammed shut behind her, a pathetic echo of her impotent fury. Did I already know this encounter was headed to a bleak place? Absolutely. I'd seen the storm gathering, the dark clouds of her insecurity threatening to unleash a deluge. It was almost dawn, though, and I could feel Hannah's raw fury from the far end of the hall, a venomous current. So I spent the night in the guest room, not out of fear, but out of a calculated desire to let her stew, to let the poison of her own inadequacy consume her. Perhaps a little rest would help dissolve that temper. Perhaps she would wake up, realize the foolishness of her outburst, and return to her rightful place as my adoring, decorative partner. This feeling of being cornered, of my carefully constructed world threatening to unravel, was a familiar echo of that fiasco with the gilded frame, when I nearly lost everything to a rival I underestimated. I would not make that mistake again. The next morning, from across the breakfast counter, the beautiful woman stared right through me. Her eyes, usually so vibrant, were cold, unseeing. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice a carefully modulated meekness designed to disarm, to invite a return to the status quo. She finished her coffee, tossed the empty cup into the sink with a brittle clatter, and exited the room without a single word. A theatrical exit, I noted, utterly predictable. Over the next few days, a chilling game began. I'd catch her watching me whenever she thought I wasn't paying attention, her gaze a phantom weight on my skin. While in the shower, the bathroom door would shiver open just a little, and I'd quickly turn off the water and shout, "Hello?" only to be met with silence. In the middle of the night, floorboards would squeak and I'd catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure in the outside hall. But by the time I flicked on the bedside lamp and scrambled to my feet, the quiet house would be snoozing peacefully. It was unnerving, certainly, an annoyance. But I refused to believe the obvious truth that I was terrified of my own wife. The very notion was preposterous. I, Victor Kane, who could bend the wills of the most hardened collectors, who could outmaneuver rivals with a whisper and a smile, who had survived a childhood that would break lesser men terrified of a woman. It sounded ridiculous. If my associates, the gallery owners and critics I so carefully cultivated, caught me tiptoeing past the master bedroom or jumping at my own reflection, they'd have scoffed. You can bench 220, Kane, but you're terrified of your Mrs. Police. Such a public display of my vulnerability, even in this private hell, brought back the cold dread of the auction of secrets, when I felt those darker forces closing in, sniffing out my past. Emma, bless her naive heart, would never have dared such a direct assault, though her growing suspicion of my methods was becoming a tiresome inconvenience. A small, persistent gnawing. Unlike this roaring inferno, so rather than retreat to a hotel, a humiliating admission of weakness, I marched into our room one night. A lavish bouquet of crimson roses clutched in my hand. My impeccably tailored suit felt like a suit of armor. I stood before her, a picture of feigned contrition, and announced to Hannah that I couldn't hold a candle to her. I spun a tale, a masterpiece of manipulative flattery, every time the human beam of sunlight I was privileged enough to call my wife and I stood next to each other. I looked so ugly by comparison, onlookers wondered whether my parents might have been related. My words were a balm, a saccharine poison designed to lull her back into complacency, to make her feel superior, to make her drop her guard. Hannah gave me a long, hard stare, her eyes searching before finally slowly pulling back the bedsheets. What was I meant to do? Wait for a damn smoke signal? I hopped straight in, desperate to believe we'd closed the book on that ugly chapter of our marriage, that my cleverness had once again prevailed. When I woke up, the world was a nightmare. My hands and feet were bound to the bedposts by cold, unforgiving metal cuffs. My dearly beloved sat on top of me, a grotesque parody of intimacy, wearing a face mask, her hips straddling my chest. In her gloved hand, there was a glass container filled with clear, viscous liquid. The sight of it sent a primal jolt of fear through me, a chilling echo of the helplessness I felt as a boy watching Peter's breath grow shallow. Hannah's voice, muffled by the mask, was eerily calm, devoid of her usual histrionics. "I've been mulling over what you said," she purred, "and you were right. Before we are equal." As she unscrewed the lid, a pungent, acrid aroma seeped out, singeing my nostril hairs, assaulting my senses. "But that got me thinking," she continued, her voice gaining a terrifying edge. "If I'm not the pretty one, what exactly do I bring to this marriage? Nothing, that's what. So I'm gonna knock you down a few pegs, you know, to even things out." The container dangled directly above my skull, slowly tipping forward inch by terrible, agonizing inch. Along the side, there was a yellow and black illustration of a beaker spilling over a bare hand and eating away at the flesh. Oh God. A stammering mess, I choked out a feeble, "Hannah, please." The last thing I saw was her big, bright smile, the smile that had made so many men melt like butter in a hot pan, now twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated malice. Then scalding liquid doused my eyes, and an invisible battalion of hungry ants, a million tiny burning needles, sunk their mandibles into my skin. The pain was immediate, absolute, a blinding inferno that consumed my vision, my identity, my very being. From there are only vague, horrifying echoes. Me clawing my way across the room, a guttural scream issuing from my bubbling lips, eye jelly, my precious eyes, the windows to my manipulative soul, oozing onto the carpet. Either I broke free from my restraints, or Hannah, in a perverse act of twisted mercy, released me. The world appeared as blobs of swirling color, a nauseating, distorted canvas, and the front of my nightshirt kept growing hotter by the second, the acid eating through the fabric, eating through me. As I ripped it off over my skull, there came a flash of bright light, accompanied by her cackling laughter, a sound that would forever haunt my fractured memory. It occurred to me then, through the haze of agony, that Hannah was probably watching this with great amusement, delighted by her husband's disfigurement. What I didn't realize at the time was that she'd also snapped photos documenting my humiliation to WhatsApp to our closest friends. In the morning, they'd wake up, open pictures of me wrestling my shirt over my head, accompanied by the caption, "My ugly man's got that beach bod," and chuckle at what they believed was my disgusting Halloween mask. The thought of their laughter, their pity, was almost as searing as the acid itself. Disoriented, still burning, I screamed for help through liquefying lips again and again. There came no response. The silence of the house was a mocking echo of my helplessness. My phone wasn't charging on the bedside cabinet. My fingers, raw and trembling, fumbled around on my hands and knees past the carpeted hall, finally uncovering a cold, tiled floor. The bathroom. Guided by muscle memory, by the desperate primal instinct for survival, I worked my way over into the bathtub, my hands spider-walking up the side. With help from the towel rack, I dragged myself to a standing position, my muscles screaming in protest. The controls for the shower sat at chest height. Still blind, with the inferno raging on my face, growing worse with each passing second, I mashed buttons until a blast of perfect icy water hit me in the face, providing momentary blessed relief from the pain, a brief respite from the consuming fire. It wasn't long before the shower head got yanked from its holster. The jet pelted me in the stomach, moved across my torso and around the side of my thighs. As it turned out, Hannah, in her depraved delight, decided to record an Insta story. Water fight with the hideous hubby. Love how we're still so goofy after all these years. My stomach churned, not just from the pain, but from the sheer, unadulterated malice of it all. I toppled over the side of the tub, my ribs thudding against the cold, unforgiving floor. A short time later, I found myself in the outer hall, my hand groping for purchase but finding only air. I went toppling down the stairs, each sickening thud a fresh insult to my battered body. Disoriented, bruised, bleeding, I found myself trapped in that maze of a house, my own gilded cage turned into a personal hell. This wasn't working. My only chance of summoning help, of regaining control, was with Hannah's phone. But how to get it from her? She was a monster, a deranged beast, but she was still, in her own twisted way, cunning. With a series of stiff shoves, my darling wife wrestled me onto the armchair in the lounge, her delicate voice barely audible through the agony-filled haze, whispering something about capturing the moment. She eased herself into a seat across my lap, one arm draped across the back of my neck. Oh God, she was taking a selfie. She was actually taking a selfie. She really had lost it. The sheer audacity, the narcissistic depravity of it ignited a spark of cold fury within me, overriding the pain. The second I saw a flashing light, a brief blinding flash, I sprung into action. Later, I was told in the action shot captured by the phone, my face had the consistency of strawberry jelly, and where our cheeks touched, melted skin stretched out like the warm cheese on a piece of garlic bread. Still blind, my rage a guiding force, I lashed out, swiping at Hannah's chest and arms, my hands finding purchase, tearing, scratching. The phone went spinning out of her hand, a small, satisfying clatter. She tried to run a pathetic, desperate scramble, but I cut off her escape, knowing if she slipped away, if she vanished into the shadows, I'd be left there to rot, disfigured and helpless, just like Peter. I couldn't save him, but I would save myself. I would never be that weak again. With every ounce of strength left in my mangled body, I rained down blows, hearing bones crunch and teeth shatter, the wet, sickening sounds, a perverse kind of music to my ears. My better half fought back, swiping at me, tearing away chunks of flesh so large medics would later tell me huge portions of bone shone through. But I was beyond pain, beyond reason. I was a force of retribution, a narcissistic god exacting vengeance. Hannah collapsed onto the floor, groaning, a broken doll. Just from running my fingers across her crumpled features, I could tell she didn't have that more breathtaking than the first day of summer smile anymore. And most of the polish had been wiped off those well-defined cheekbones. A small cold satisfaction settled in my chest, a fleeting moment of triumph amidst the chaos. From there, my survival became a desperate game of Marco Polo with the phone which had taken shelter beneath the sofa. My fingers slick with blood and fluid fumbled, searching until they brushed against the cold, smooth glass. I dragged it out the screen, a blurry green button in my ruined vision. I tapped it, a desperate prayer to a world that had betrayed me. And then a concerned voice, a lifeline, spoke back at me. I screamed. I screamed until the police officers kicked open the front door, their shouts echoing in the ruined house. Then I lay in the back of an ambulance speeding toward the hospital, the sirens loud in my ears, a paramedic promising everything would be okay, that they'd save my vision. Lies, of course. All lies. 12 weeks I spent in recovery, my face encased with bandages, a prisoner in my own damaged skin. The authorities took Hannah for her own quick pit stop in the emergency room before carting her off to jail, where she's currently awaiting trial. From what I hear, the other inmates have taken to calling her the Elephant Woman. A fitting moniker, wouldn't you agree? She tried to destroy me, to strip away my power, my image, but in the end, she only destroyed herself. I, Victor Kane, always prevail. Always.